Last time, Maddie learned the secrets of mastering money from Nico Asset Management's Yuming Wang.
So being open-minded is actually the first hurdle. And if you can overcome that, then I think an investor becomes a better investor.
Armed with her newfound knowledge, today it's the big reveal of her game plan by her financial advisor, Paul Giordano.
With Maddie's age and experience with money, we tried to keep the concept pretty simple and put it in a way that speaks her language and is a plan that she can relate to and won't have an issue following.
I think the most exciting part is honestly just having a plan, like the steps and what I can achieve by following it is very exciting. Having that security across the board that's going to span my entire life is very exciting.
We've brought Maddie to Dalton House so Paul can reveal how her financial plan has come together. How are you feeling about this whole thing?
No, this is really exciting. It's definitely something that was never something that I thought about too much. It kind of always seemed like a problem for future me, which I think is the problem that so many of us
Future me,
run
yeah,
into.
they deal with a lot. Then you get to be future me and you're like, that sucks.
Well, exactly. I feel like it's one of those things that we all avoid so much. And all of my, everyone I went to high school with in their 20s is doing the exact same thing. You're kind of just getting through day by day and, there's short-term goals. And I think, I'm learning it's very important to plan for the long term.
We've split up Maddie's investment journey into 4 main components.
Okay.
Short, medium, and medium to long term. And we've done that using different buckets of money to make it simple. So we thought that if, for whatever reason, you were injured and unable to train and unable to do what you're passionate about and therefore earn an income, what would you need to actually live through that period of time and then, get into that corporate career? So what we looked at was a bucket of money that would support Maddie for 3 years if she was unable to train and unable to make some money. And that bucket of money ended up coming to approximately $105,000. You can probably save that within the next 1 to 2 years. We initially thought it was going to take you up most likely 2 years, but based on your current earnings capacity, we think that that's probably 1 to 1.5 years, which is great news.
Yeah, that's really great news.
Based on Paul's plan, as Maddie already had some savings, she'll be able to cover up to 3 years of rent and expenses if she puts away $3,500 every month. This will give her her safety net in just 1.5 years' time. Okay, so that's covered. So in 2 years, if you save as much as Paul's telling you to, tick that box, you've got that fund sorted. That's exciting. But how do we get Maddie the house? She wants the house in Homebush because she trains there and she's got the cool apartment we saw she's renting. How long is that going to take?
That was probably Maddie's, I would say, biggest and most ambitious financial goal, which is great.
But that's everyone's, isn't it?
It is,
Everyone
yeah.
wants a house.
Yeah.
Everything you read is that this generation is not going to get one because everything's too expensive.
Well, the good news is Maddie's going to get one.
Yeah. Good.
We looked at starting to create another bucket of money. We've called it quite simply your home deposit bucket, where you would start to put in some money on a monthly or annual basis to build enough of a deposit for you to purchase your home in Sydney Olympic Park.
Paul's estimated that once she's taken care of a safety net, Maddie will need $112,000 to cover her deposit, stamp duty and legal costs. To get there, she'll need to save $1,870 a month for 5 years.
Some of the other things that we learned about you, Maddie, through our initial meeting was you definitely wanted to become a bit more structured with money. You wanted to have a bit more of a longer term plan. You wanted to understand what was going to happen later down the track. So what we created was what we've called a early retirement bucket or a point of choice bucket and then your retirement bucket. And they're 2 longer term buckets of money where now that you're 24 years old, you've got a bit of time to fill those buckets. So it's actually easier for you to start now, and it requires only a small amount of effort if you start now to create a huge amount of reward in the future. And when you think about, given the time that you have to see out this plan, where on a yearly basis, it's a little less than $4,000 a year you need to put away to give yourself 10 years of funding, half your living costs.
That is so doable when you say it like that.
$4,000 a year. So what's that a week? I suck at maths.
It's about $325 a month.
$325 a month to give her early retirement at 55. Wow. Okay, that's the power of long-term investing,
That's
right?
right.
You're so young. Paul recommends that Maddie work on building an early retirement plan with small contributions early on so they have as long as possible to grow. Well, you're an extraordinary person. You deserve every success. Paul, thank you so much for doing this for Maddie. It makes me so happy because she's well worthy.
Thank you for the
There's
opportunity.
so many more that need your help. Has this process changed your beliefs, do you think? Talk to me a little bit about your belief set now.
Definitely. No, Paul makes it seem very simple, which is nice. I think it's kind of always one of those things that's kind of seem complicated and so far from what I do in sport, and that's kind of, you know, my entire life. And it's not something I've put a lot of thought into, and it's always has seemed very distant and complicated. But kind of after the masterclass and talking with you and Paul, it does seem very simple. It's just kind of steps to follow, very much like what I do for a living.
This part of the journey is now over for Maddie. She's learned that the numbers are well within her reach, and as long as she sticks to the plan Paul's put together for her, she'll reach her financial goals.
I will be telling absolutely everyone I know that it is essential to start planning for your future. I think one of the biggest things that I've noticed is that starting early is really, really important. And one of the biggest things I would say to people that I know in their 20s especially is get on this now. Like, it's so much easier if you start early. Being able to go into a race and just think about the race makes me a better athlete. It does help my job to go in there and not be worried about the financial side of winning this race or not winning this race. At the end of the day, like, I perform better if I'm only thinking about the race. So yeah, it's definitely helped that side of things.
Just as important as Maddie getting her financial plan was her being able to see that her mindset and beliefs around money had to change, and that in fact she could create wealth by sticking to a disciplined training plan, and nobody deserves it more than Maddie.
Our enemy is not out there, it's actually ourselves. Understanding who you are, what your weakness is, and be able to overcome those mental challenges is often what differentiates good investor from mediocre investor.
Welcome back and welcome to our panel guest, Tanya Sale, CEO of Outsource Financial, and Domain's Eliza Owen. Welcome to you both. Well, we've all seen Maddie's story. Maddie wants a house, like so many millennials who want a house. But, you know, I've read your research, Eliza. You tell me it takes a minimum of 6 years to save up for a first house in Sydney.
That's right. So Domain just put out its first home buyers report. So we look at entry-level prices across the capital cities, and based on incomes for people in that 25 to 34 age bracket, we estimate how long it would take them to save just for that 20% deposit. So the national story is that for an entry-level house, you're looking at about 5 years. For an entry-level unit, about 4 years. But of course, in a market like Sydney, where it's more expensive, you're looking at around about 6 years to save for the 20% deposit on an entry-level home, which is currently sitting at about $650,000.
Oh, wow.
650, yeah, look, and that's, you know, I guess that's entry-level somewhere in Sydney, but Maddie wants Homebush, that's a bit more again, so...
Well, interestingly, the typical purchase price for a unit in Homebush is currently around that $650,000 mark.
OK,
Yeah.
all right, well, there's hope for Maddie, this is good. And Tanya, you've got a very large network of independent mortgage brokers working in your business.
Yes.
When should Maddie get a mortgage broker? If she's going to have to save up for 5 or 6 years to get this unit, when's the time to engage a mortgage broker?
Look, I mean, I appreciate what Eliza says about the 5 and 6 years, but that's based on a 20% deposit. Now, in the finance world, in the mortgage world, there's a lot of packages out there that do not require that 20%, Vanessa. So, especially with the first home owners, which will be Maddie.
Maddie, yep.
Okay, they have what we call, I guess, things called non-genuine savings. And it's not 20% because lenders, mortgage insurance has to be involved. So if I was Maddie, I'd be starting to look now. I'd be choosing a mortgage broker, sitting down and actually planning.
That's
Plan
interesting.
in advance.
And does a mortgage broker want to spend time with a millennial who may not buy yet, but, you know, in a few years? Is that something they're willing to do?
Definitely, Vanessa. That's
Really?
their role.
Okay.
Their role is to assist the consumer get to where they want to go. And Maddie wants an apartment or a house in Homebush. I believe, after watching Maddie, if it's done properly, which she's got a great financial planner, she'll have a great mortgage broker. I think Maddie will get there in a hell of a lot less than 5 years.
She might buck the research, Eliza. I hope so, for her sake, because
Yeah.
she's such an incredible and inspirational young woman. Honestly, she's one of those people you meet and you just fall in love with her. But Eliza, like nearly a quarter of millennials have given up on ever owning a home. What does Domain say to that? I mean, is that a market that you're not going to get because they're just not going to buy?
So I think there are a few things that have been against young people in terms of trying to get their first home, right? Especially in the Sydney and Melbourne markets, we had these enormous house price booms between 2013 and 2017. Now the market's in a downturn, prices are coming down, and that will be providing some relief for some of those first home buyers. But unfortunately, the high house price increases have been set against the relatively low wage growth. So that's been another challenge. But I actually think the biggest challenge that young people have is actually envisioning themselves later in life, in retirement. It's well documented that the further away a goal seems, the less motivated we can be to actually try and achieve it. So I think if people try and actually start thinking about themselves, okay, if I'm in retirement, do I want to be 67 and still renting? Do I want to be 67 and still paying off a mortgage? But I guess where house prices get higher, it sort of gets harder and harder to envision that goal.
Tanya, tell me, it feels like credit is tightening. The Banking Royal Commission, like the banks are just clamping down on lending. How are brokers dealing with that, and are they going to be able to assist?
Yeah, look, it's been tough, Vanessa. The challenges from that Royal Commission have been unbelievable. Words couldn't describe what this industry or mortgage brokers had to go through. What the consequences from the Royal Commission have been is credit policies have tightened to a level that I've never seen before. So I can understand not just the first home owners, anybody that's wanting to borrow money for an owner-occupied or an investment, it doesn't matter. It's just so hard at this point in time. Now, this is why I'm a big fan of sitting down now, no matter if you want something in 1 year, 2 years or whatever, you've got to sit down because the policies are just so far out there and it's hard. And then one of the components, and Eliza, you probably would have seen this in your field as well, when it comes to living expenses, like even for the Gen Y, the millennials, they're going to find it tough. And the reason why is with the millennials, they have a great life. They live where they want to live, they rent where they want to rent, they pamper themselves, they go on experiences and they wine and dine. And you go, wow, I wish I was a Gen Y. But then what happens? Something clicks in them and they go, you know what? I'm sick of renting. I now want to buy my own home. That's where the issue will start because their living expenses for these lenders now who are deep diving into those expenses, and then they see the Gen Ys and they go, what the heck is going on here?
This is the smashed abo syndrome. They're eating out too much. And so banks are judging that, right? They're going into your expenditure.
You know what is so interesting, though? Like what I was saying before, like in the behavioural economic space, it's like if a goal seems further away, then you are more likely to turn to short-term orientation, to
this
impulse
is why
spending.
We eat, right? It's the same thing. Oh, pleasure. Why am I
So it's funny that everyone looks at millennials and Gen Y and says, they're just living for the now and spending for the now. That's actually, there are systematic and psychological reasons for that. And it's interesting that comes back around and sort of affects their ability even further.
It's going to bite them on the backside, basically, because they eventually want to buy their own home. But because of their lavish spending, and then now, where before we didn't deep dive into those kind of expenses.
Yeah, right. Well, when I got my first mortgage, no one looked at when I was eating out and everything else.
No,
I don't remember any of that. I just had to have the savings.
Yeah, exactly. And there were some living expenses there, but not to the extent now. It's just unbelievable.
And as you say, Tanya, with the Royal Commission, one of the outcomes is that banks really got away from assessing based on that standard household expenditure model.
Yeah.
They're trying to individually assess people more carefully based on what they're spending. In a way, I think it can be good in that it stops people from overextending themselves with their debt potentially.
Well, we do have a big debt problem in this country. Like,
so
we're
it's
a very
about,
indebted nation.
being more prudent.
But they've gone off the Richter scale. They really have with this.
Well, I think it's an incredible issue for us to look at. One, for Maddie, because I think we all agree she's going to make it.
She's going to
And
make it,
I'm interested to hear you
Vanessa.
say get a broker now, so that's something else Maddie will be watching, and
Yes.
she will do that. Eliza, I hear you on millennials are kind of have it tough, the way that everyone looks at them and views them, yet you are one of these
Yes.
millennials and you're saying there's more at play here. And who the hell can afford a house in Sydney, quite frankly? It's a really tough market. So maybe the answer is everyone has to move out of Sydney, but that's a whole nother segment.
It is.
But look, that's all we have time for today. Tanya Sale, Eliza Owen, thank you so much for joining me on the show. I'll see you all next week on The Secrets of the Money Masters.